Colonial America, Lost Colony of Roanoke. The Lost Colony of Roanoke is the story of 117 weary men, women and children who made history on Roanoke Island in July 1587, establishing the first attempted settlement of its kind in the Americas. Recruited by Sir Walter Raleigh, the settlers included John White, his pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare, her husband Ananias Dare, and the Indian chief Manteo. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter she named Virginia, earning the distinction of being the first English child born on American soil. 3 years later, John White returned to find the settlement deserted, plundered and surrounded by overgrown brush. Despite repeated attempts, he was never able to raise the funding and resources to make the trip to America again. White died many years later on one of Raleigh's estates, ignorant to the fate of his family and the colony. The story is reenacted every summer during performances of The Lost Colony, the nation's longest symphonic drama.
Where was the colony located? Off the coast of North Carolina, on Roanoke Island, was where the Roanoke colony was situated. At the time, Virginia regarded the territory to be a part of it.
First colony at Roanoke. Sir Walter Raleigh received the land of Virginia in North America in 1584 from Queen Elizabeth I. In order to grow their empire, the British sought to establish a presence in the Americas. Captains Philip Armada and Arthur Barlow were dispatched by Raleigh to survey the area. They encountered the locals and learned about Roanoke Island. Raleigh came to the conclusion that this would be an ideal location for a colony.
Sir Richard Greenville led the first expedition to Roanoke in 1585, leaving 107 settlers under the charge of Ralph Lane. They built a fort and fought with Native Americans, but when Sir Francis Drake offered to take them back to England, the colonists agreed.
The colonists attempted to establish a colony at Roanoke in 1587, but were unable to build a thriving colony due to disputes with the local tribes. John White returned to England to gain supplies and reinforcements. The colony has disappeared. After returning to England, White could find little help for the colony. England was in the middle of a large battle with Spain and the Spanish Armada. As a result, White was unable to return until 3 years later in 1590. When White arrived, he found the colony completely abandoned. The only clues that White found included the word Croatoan carved into a fence post and crow carved into a tree.
White, though, saw no indication of a conflict and assumed that the colonists had relocated to Croatoan, as they termed a nearby island, Hatteras Island. He had also instructed the colonists to carve a Maltese cross if they were being forced to leave, so he had another reason to be hopeful. He assumed the colonists were safe because he couldn't find a cross. A bad storm prevented White from searching the nearby island for the colonists, so he was forced to return to England.
Theories on the disappearance. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony is the subject of numerous theories. A lot of historians believe that the colonists relocated. They most likely relocated to Hatteras Island or farther inland into North Carolina's forests. Eventually, the colonists might have starved to death or been murdered by tribal groups in the area. They might also have survived, developed relationships with a nearby group, and subsequently assimilated into that tribe. One theory holds that they joined the North Carolina Lumbee tribe. Another theory holds that the colonists were captured and the settlement was destroyed by the Spaniards, who didn't want the English in the Americas.
How did Roanoke fail? It was, like later English colonies, poorly supplied, and the first colonists were actively hostile toward local native people. This lack of allies would have made survival as an autonomous community especially difficult. Surviving as distinctly Englishmen and women may have been impossible.
What was the first attempt by the English to establish a colony in the Americas? Virginia Colony, Jamestown, Roanoke Colony, New York. The establishment of the Roanoke Colony was an attempt by Sir Walter Raleigh to found the first permanent English settlement in North America. What was the name of the colony that failed to establish a colony in the Americas? Lost Colony, Ghost Colony, Crow Colony, White Colony. The legend of Roanoke Island has been passed down from generation to generation since 1590, when a group of 120 English settlers mysteriously vanished. In the late 1500s, the English made their first attempts to settle in North America on Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of North Carolina. Where was the Roanoke colony located? Virginia, New Mexico, Roanoke, New York. The Roanoke colony was located on Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina. The land was considered part of Virginia at the time. In 1584, the land of Virginia in North America was granted to Sir Walter Raleigh by Queen Elizabeth I. The British hoped to establish a foothold in the Americas to expand their empire. When was the land of Virginia granted to Sir Walter Raleigh? 1586, 1584, 1567, 1532. In 1584, Queen Elizabeth I granted the rights to settle the Roanoke colony to Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh sent a fleet to investigate the area called Virginia that year. A group of colonists, led by Sir Richard Grenville, established a settlement in 1585. Who did Raleigh send out to explore Roanoke Island? Captain William Amata and Captain Philip Barlow. Captain Philip Amata and Captain Arthur Barlow. Captain Philip Barlow and Captain William Barlow. Captain David Amata and Captain Arthur Amata. In 1584, explorers Philip Amatus and Arthur Barlow were the first known Europeans to set eyes on the island. They had been sent to the area by Sir Walter Raleigh with the mission of scouting the broad sounds and estuaries in search of an ideal location for settlement. What did Raleigh decide to do to establish a colony in the Americas? A good place to establish a colony. He was not sure. He decided to take risk. He just followed Queen orders. In 1584, explorers Philip Amatus and Arthur Barlow were the first known Europeans to set eyes on the island. They had been sent to the area by Sir Walter Raleigh with the mission of scouting the broad sounds and estuaries in search of an ideal location for settlement. Who led the first expedition to Roanoke? Captains Philip Amata, Sir Richard Grenville, Arthur Barlow, Sir Francis Drake. In the spring of 1585, 7 ships sailed toward the promise of Roanoke Island. Sir Richard Grenville led the military expedition. Their mission was to establish an outpost for pirating and to prime the land for a permanent settlement. When did the first colony arrive at Roanoke? 1585, 1576, 1588, 1580. The Roanoke Island Colony, the first English settlement in the New World, was founded by English explorer Sir Walter Raleigh in August 1585. How many settlers did Grenville leave at Roanoke? 13, 126, 107, 117. The first expedition to Roanoke was led by Sir Richard Grenville. The expedition arrived at Roanoke in 1585. Greenville left 107 settlers, all men, at Roanoke under the charge of Ralph Lane. Greenville then returned to England in order to gather additional supplies for the settlement. What did the settlers struggle to survive? They met with Indian chief and discussed peace. They made alliance with French. Settlers built a fort at Roanoke. They requested for reinforcement. The settlers built a fort at Roanoke, but struggled to survive. It didn't help matters that they were constantly fighting with the local Native Americans. When English explorer Sir Francis Drake passed by the settlement and offered to take them back to England, the colonists agreed. Who were the settlers fighting with? Native Americans, wild animals, French, food shortages. The first Roanoke colonists did not fare well, suffering from dwindling food supplies and Indian attacks. Who left Roanoke a year earlier? Greenville, Captains Philip Amata, Arthur Barlow, Sir Francis Drake. Later that summer, Grenville returned to England, leaving behind 108 men under the charge of Ralph Lane and expecting a relief mission to arrive in the autumn. Who was the first child born in the Americas? Virginia Dare, Nijina Dare, Virginia Dove, Zara Dare. Virginia Dare was born on August 18, 1587, and was the first English child born in the New World. Dare's parents were part of Sir Walter Raleigh's expedition to explore and settle land in North America on behalf of the English crown.